Welcome again to everybody, and it is my pleasure to introduce Leslie R. as our main speaker tonight.
Hi, everyone. My name is Leslie, and I am an alcoholic. Hi. I want to thank Keith for inviting me here to speak. I've known Keith ever since I moved to Las Vegas 30 years ago. My sobriety date is May 18th, 1991, and I am very grateful for that. I guess I'll just do what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I grew up in a Air Force home. I was an Air Force brat, and we traveled around a lot when I was young. My father retired from the Air Force when I was 13, and we lived in LA when he retired. And my mom, my mom wanted us to go to the best schools in California, so all 5 of us and 3 dogs and all the fish moved into this 2-bedroom apartment in Beverly Hills. And which was great, and I got a great education there, but my parents weren't wealthy. They didn't have a whole lot of money, and I went to school with all these people that had tons, and so I always felt like not enough, not good enough. But when I got sober, I realized I always felt that way. I thought it was because I was living in Beverly Hills and my mom was shopping at the Sears bargain basement, but I always felt like that, before we moved there. I started drinking and smoking pot when I was 13, smoking cigarettes, and I think, puberty just did a number on me. I think I was born alcoholic, and I think when I, reached puberty, I just couldn't cope. And I think that's one of the things I've realized in sobriety is that my coping mechanism never worked. And so drugs and alcohol really, really helped. And I used drugs and alcohol to fix everything. And I didn't really realize that, if I just sat there and felt my feelings, it would go away. I never thought that whatever I was feeling would go away. It always felt like it was going to last forever. And so drugs, alcohol were my pals. And, I was always giving up drugs because, of course, I was getting into a lot of trouble at school, and they made me go see Dr. Morgenstern, who was the school psychologist. And so I was just a mess. And so, when I was in the 9th grade, I gave up, speed, because speed was my problem. And when a couple years later, it was deemed that barbiturates were my problem. If I just didn't take barbiturates, my life would be okay. And then, of course, the next year, the PCP. If I just didn't take PCP, I would be okay. And, and that was always the case with me because I always had something to substitute what I was giving up. And when I got into my late teens, early 20s, I had pretty much given up everything except for marijuana, cocaine, mushrooms, and alcohol. So those were my staples for a while. And, I thought I was doing okay. I was one of those functioning alcoholics. I had a job and, I thought I was doing okay. And I got a job in the entertainment industry, and I was an actor's agent. Go figure. I started out as a receptionist, and they promoted me, and I got this really fun job. And everybody did cocaine, and everybody drank. And so it just didn't seem abnormal to me at all. And it was almost like it was part of the job. You kind of had to fit in with everybody and go to all the parties, and it was wild. But I got married when I was 23, and I had my son when I was 24. And it just seemed like life was just so hard. It was so hard being a mom. It was so hard being a wife. It was so hard working and doing all that. And I was always. Kevin was talking about, his brain and what was going on in there, and my brain was always messing with me. I mean, I always doubted everything I ever thought. I always questioned everything I ever thought. And when my emotions, which I had a lot of, would get a hold of me, I didn't know what to think, and I didn't know what to do. And I would blame you or him or them for whatever was going on in my life. It was just easier that way. And I totally didn't think it was me. I totally thought I was this really. So Gail and I go back a long way, and we shared a sponsor once, and she called me Mary Poppins. No, she called me Hannibal Lecter disguised as Mary Poppins. and I kind of took offense to that, but it was kind of true. We did a lot of cocaine in my marriage, and my ex-husband and I used to fight a lot. It turns out he was a narcissist, and I didn't know what that was back then. Nobody knew what that was back then, really. And I just, I just didn't think I was good enough, and that he was good enough, and he was always on at me, and I was always on at him, and it got really out of control. But in the meantime, we're going to New Orleans, we're going to Mardi Gras, we're partying, we're having parties at the house. We have these huge gatherings. He even built a balcony once on our house just so we could have a Mardi Gras party in our front yard and throw beads and, earn beads and do the whole thing that they do at Mardi Gras. And, and that was what we did. At some point, I had this therapist, and she was like, one day I had the worst weekend, and it turned out that, she goes, "What happened?" And I said, "Well, we did this, and then we went out to dinner, and then we went to the show, and then we did some cocaine, and then we came back, and we did, and I'm just rambling along." And she's like, "Whoa, wait, back up. You were doing cocaine?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Well, how often do you do that?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know, every weekend." And and it was weird because I hadn't really thought about my drug use in a long time. And I was like, you think that could be my problem? Do you think cocaine could be my problem? And as soon, it hit me, and I was like, oh, well, then I don't have to do cocaine. I don't have to do that. So, of course, that was a big problem with my husband, but whatever. I stopped doing cocaine. But what ended up happening is I just kept drinking more and more, and I loved cognac. Cognac was my drink of choice. And I had the little snifter, and it was very elegant, and I loved it. And it would, those bottles of Remy Martin at the time, and this was many, many years ago, they were still like $30 a bottle, and that was a lot for alcohol. And I would go through one of those every week. And you're supposed to just like have this little tiny bit in the bottom of a snifter, but that's just not how it happened for me. Anyways, right before I got sober, we had done Mardi Gras again. We had gone to New Orleans. We'd partied our asses off, and I was so miserable. And I remember I was all dressed up. I had feathers coming out of my head, and I had this beautiful dress. And I'm walking down Bourbon Street, and I'm in tears because my life was so unmanageable. It was so bad. My brain wasn't working. Everything I thought, like I said, I questioned everything, and I hurt. So anytime somebody said anything to me, it was like somebody stabbing me in the heart, and I just couldn't cope at all. And I remember coming back from that Mardi Gras, thinking, okay, I'm not going to drink for a month. I'm just not going to do anything. And within like 3 or 4 days, I was drinking again, and I couldn't believe it. And I don't know. I think a couple more months went by, and it was Mother's Day. And it was in the morning, about 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and I had gotten to another fight with my husband, and it was really bad. And he was accusing me of things that I didn't do. And I was yelling at him, and he's yelling at me, and I stormed out, and I'm in the backyard drinking a beer at 9 o'clock in the morning on Mother's Day, thinking, I hate my life. And, for some reason, I just had that moment of clarity, It's like, number one, it's 9 o'clock in the morning on a Mother's Day. My son and my husband are in the house. I'm out here drinking a beer. And I really don't remember whether I did that or not, whatever it was that he was accusing me of. In retrospect, now that I know who he is and why he did some of the things, I probably never did that. But it didn't matter because I couldn't remember, really. I was just, making sure that he knew that I had never done it, but I couldn't remember. And the fact that I couldn't remember, and I'm sitting there crying, drinking. I had to go to work that day too, but that's stupid. I just thought, I can't do this anymore. And I had that moment. It was like, I can't drink anymore. And I remember a couple years earlier, I had come here with my mom. Mom used to take me here to Las Vegas for my birthday. And one year I was sitting at a blackjack table and drinking my rum and Coke, and it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I look over, and there's this guy sitting at the end of the table, and it's Luca Bercovici. And Luca Bercovici was my very first boyfriend, and he was a junkie, and he's just drinking club soda. And it was so weird to see him drinking a club soda at 1 o'clock in the morning in Las Vegas. And it turns out that he was 2 years sober. And I was blindsided by it. I was like, oh, wow, that's good for you. You really needed it. And anyways, so when I got home from work that night, that's who I called. I called Luca, and he said that he was going to AA and that he would take me to a meeting. And I was like, okay. Now, I lived in the San Fernando Valley in LA, and he lived in Santa Monica. So I met him in Santa Monica, and we went to this meeting at the Comedy Store, and which I thought was really cool, that I'm going to a noon meeting at the Comedy Store in Santa Monica, and it was packed. It was packed, and I was petrified to be there, but I'm glad I had my friend with me, you know, for some kind of support. But what happened was, and I'm sure everybody here in this room has had that experience where you could walk into this room and people are sharing stories about themselves, about what just happened, about how they thought about it, and just being honest and laughing and the things they talked about, I thought about, and I was mortified by what I was thinking, and they're laughing about it, and I'm thinking, wow, I want to be able to laugh about my stuff. And, you know, and it was like people say in these rooms, these were my people. I could tell these were my people, and I needed to be here. And they gave me a big book. They told me to read the first 164 pages. And I went, and going back a little bit, I was the self-help queen. I had purchased every single self-help book on the planet prior to getting sober. And, you know, and they were really great, these books. But they always had these workbooks in the back that you were supposed to do so that you could learn all these lessons and help yourself. And I could just never do the workbook. I would read these books and I'd think, well, that's really cool, but I don't have time for this. Anyways, but when I was reading the big book that night, I just kept reading and reading, going, yeah, I could, yeah. So I was like, this is it. This is what I need. And I was really excited. I went to a bunch of meetings with Luca on the west side of LA for a week or two. And then I thought, I should probably find some meetings around my house. I bet they have them. I was traveling like 45 minutes to go to a meeting. And then I called my girlfriend, Evelyn. And Evelyn lived around the corner from me. And she and I were really good friends. And we did a lot of drinking and drugging. But I hadn't seen her in a while. She had come to help me with my son's birthday party like a month before. And I never heard from her again. And I kept calling her, especially when I started going to meetings. I just wanted to let her know what's going on, and she wouldn't return my calls. And finally, she returned my call, and she was really weird. And I said, well, have you been? She's like, I'm okay, I'm all right. I said, well, I stopped drinking and I'm going to AA. And she, you know, there was like dead silence on the other end. And she's like, Leslie, I've got 2 weeks, or, you know, I've got 3 weeks. And she had gotten sober like right after my son's birthday, but she was afraid to tell me because I was such a not safe place to be. I was not safe. And so she knew where all the meetings were around my house. And I started going to meetings with her, and then I started going by myself. And I loved going to meetings, and I loved AA. But I had a really hard time. I think, the first step talks about, admitting you were a real alcoholic. And I think I could admit I was a real alcoholic, but I didn't really. I didn't really, because I wasn't that desperate to find a really great sponsor. I wanted to find the coolest chick that was in the room, the one that dressed really great and had a really cute boyfriend. And those are the things that mattered to me then. And then, of course, she would go out. And for the first 3 years of my sobriety, I think I did the 1, 2, and 3 many times. But I guess I didn't want to do, the steps. I didn't think I needed to. And my husband and I moved to New Orleans. And of course, he was out there partying, doing his thing, and I'm trying to stay sober in New Orleans, which was an interesting feat. But eventually, I just knew that this marriage was terrible for me, for him, for my son, for everybody. And so I moved here to Las Vegas. And I remember driving here from New Orleans, just going, because I had lived here once before when I was like 2 years sober, I moved here. And I hated the meetings because they were so different than the ones in LA. They just were different. And, you know, I could probably count how many meetings I went on my hands those first 2 years that I was here. And so then I started hanging out at the Psychic Eye bookstore because I thought, well, you know, I just need to, you know, get spiritual. I need to find a God. I need to, you know, ascend. I wanted to ascend. And so, you know, I started reading all these books and didn't go to a whole lot of meetings. But when I left New Orleans, I was just like, I don't care how much you hate those meetings. I don't care how much you hate those meetings. You will find meetings. You will go to meetings. You will do 90 meetings in 90 days. And because I was desperate, you know, I was desperate. I was in a lot of pain. And, you know, I just knew that I needed to do this. Now, in this time, I started studying Buddhist philosophy and A Course in Miracles, and trying to find this spiritual experience without AA. And I went to see Marianne Williamson speak in LA, and in the lobby of the theater, you know, they had all these books laid out that you could buy and different tchotchke stuff. But there was this one book, and it was called The Course in Miracles and AA Side by Side. And it was so cool because when you open it up, it had step 1 on this page, and then on the other facing page, it had the page in the Course in Miracles where they talked about admitting you were powerless. And it went through the whole 12 steps. And it really struck me, it really struck me that I was almost there, you know, I was almost there. But after everything I had been through at that point, and it was a lot of pain, you know, if you guys haven't done the steps, do the steps, you know, it's much easier than not. But what I realized when I was reading this book, because of course I bought it, was that I'd read all these books, studied all these different ways, and the bottom line was that AA was the easier, softer way. AA, the book had the steps outlined. It showed you what to do. The 12 and 12 showed you what they meant. And there were all these people in AA that were willing to help you and willing to get you through the process. And when I was doing all these other things, it was just me in the book, just like my self-help books, where I wouldn't do the workbooks in the back. It was the same thing that I was doing there. So anyways, I got this sponsor here, and she just wasn't it. She didn't take me through the steps. She just wanted to pray about everything, and I knew that was not going to help me. I knew I had to do the steps. I knew I had to find somebody that would call me out on my stuff, because I'd always found people that really didn't do that. And then I found the step Nazi from hell, as I like to call her. And, you know, I really do owe my sobriety to this woman. She definitely called me out on my stuff. She took me through the steps. It was brutal. But I remember, like, the first 3 steps I'd done so many times that wasn't, I mean, I got it. But what happened when I got to step 3, was that I realized that I was a real alcoholic. You know, I had said it for the last 5 or 6 years, but in my gut, I tell people this sometimes when I'm sharing. You know, I still had my husband, I still had my job, I still had my son, I still had my teeth. You know, I was good. Not like some of you, you know. And so there's something in that made me think that I didn't have to do the work, that I could find a easier, softer way. And anyways, you know, she had us do this thing where, you know, to list all the ways your life is unmanageable. And, you know, and one of the things that came up for me was that people always bailed me out. My mother always bailed me out of things. My father bailed me out. I never saw any real ramifications for anything I did. And, you know, since when I first got sober, of course, I lost my job and I lost my husband and I had lost my back molar, and you know, all of a sudden I'm thinking, you know, well, I think, you know, maybe I need to get real here. So I was 6 years sober when I went through the steps. It changed my life. It really did. When I was able to look at my 4th step and 5th step and see and take responsibility for what's happened in my life. You know, I never took responsibility for any of the bad stuff that happened in my life. I only took responsibility for the good stuff that happened in my life. And it was, you know, I remember when I was newly sober, the words, "the truth will set you free." I heard that a lot in early sobriety. And I liked that, you know, I liked it a lot. But I didn't realize that I was as selfish and self-centered as I was, and how manipulative I was. I had no clue that's not what I did. And by going through the steps, by doing a 4th step and doing a 5th step, I was able to see my part. And it was so painful. You know, I remember, you know, sometimes these memories would come up and it would just like be like a punch in the stomach. It was so mortifying to see some of the stuff that was coming up and owning it. And then, but what I realized was that once I owned it, once I saw it and took responsibility for it, it went away. It was like it was gone. And there was this freedom that I had been holding on to, this negative part of myself, trying to protect it, and it was killing me. When I always thought before I did the steps, that steps 6 and 7 were like throwaway steps, you know. Of course I'm willing to give everything to God, of course. But what happened was my sponsor made me stay there for a while before we went on to 8 and 9, just to kind of see what it feels like to give things to God. And it was weird because you know, when you ask God to heal your life, He shines a very bright light on the things you need to look at. And you know, things would happen that were similar to some things that happened in my, you know, that I wrote about in my 4th step. And I wanted to react the way I always reacted. And I knew, because of my inventory, that probably wasn't a good idea, but, you know, fuck it, I'd do it anyways, you know, and I'm just gonna, because they deserve it, or I need to express my feelings, or whatever I wanted to do. And, you know, so I would react the way I always reacted, and it, like always, would blow up in my face, and it would turn into a disaster. And then something similar would happen a couple weeks later, and I'd think, this is really close to that other thing that I was doing, and this didn't really work out real well, but damn it, I'm going to do it again. And, and I would do the same thing, the same behavior again, and disaster would strike. And then the next time, for me, it's the 3 times. I have to experience a similar situation 3 times before I'm willing to totally say, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. This has never worked for me. And, and it's kind of an interesting phenomenon that every time something would come up and I would have a bad reaction to it, the minute I truly gave it to God and didn't act on it, right? It's one thing to say, okay, God, this is yours, and then do what you always did anyways. I mean, that doesn't work. But when I truly did that restraint of pen and tongue and gave it to God and just let it be and walk away, miracles happened. I mean, incredible things happened. And I was just blown away how situations, people would evolve if I didn't get in there and try and fix it. And for me, that was a huge deal. And it really made me who I am today. Today, I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love Leslie, and I knew when I first got here that Alcoholics Anonymous, if I did everything that book tells me to do, that I could be the Leslie I always wanted to be. And I can tell you today that that's very true, that today I am the Leslie I always wanted to be. Sometimes it's been hard to stay present, to stay in the moment, to do the one day at a time stuff sometimes, when new things happen to me in sobriety that I've never experienced before, like a death of a loved one or, anything that's never happened to me before and I've never had to deal with it. My first reaction is to overreact and feel sorry for myself and blame somebody else. And, learning to let go and learning that when I give things up, that incredible things can happen and do. My life really changed a lot. When I was 20 years sober, I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. It was devastating. It was devastating. And initially I was really, really afraid. And, but I was doing what was indicated, what was right in front of me. And I started doing all the chemos, and then they ended up taking out my left lung. And then it spread to my brain, and I had to have brain surgery. And, it just was brutal. But at some point before the surgeries, I decided, and this could only happen because I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, that I thought to myself, I don't want to ruin my days. I don't want to be depressed. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be afraid. I don't want to ruin today because I'm afraid of tomorrow. And that became my mantra that I said to myself every day, and I still do, is that, I don't want to ruin today. I want today to be the best day ever. And I'm a freaking miracle. The fact that, they put me on immunotherapy drugs, it worked. And I've been cancer-free for over 5 years now, and it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's ridiculous how lucky I am, and that I was able to keep a good attitude and stay happy and joyous while I was doing all this. And I couldn't have done that had I not learned all this from you guys. I didn't know how to be this person 35 years ago. I didn't. I had no clue. I was a lunatic. And, you know, I just have to remember that, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous is my base. You're still my people. I lived in Las Vegas for many, many years. And then I moved. My mother passed away almost 2 years ago. And I had taken care of her. I was her caregiver for several years. And when she passed away, I decided I was going to move to Colorado. My son lives there. My grandchildren live there. I had been trying to get jobs there for the last 15 years, and it just didn't happen. And so I decided to do that. So I moved to Colorado about 1.5 years ago. And the first thing I told myself is, you're going to go to meetings. You're going to find the people. You're going to find the meetings. You're going to do it. And that's what I did, you know. It's weird, though. You know, you go to a new place, and I'm like, hi, I'm Leslie. I just moved here, and I really need friends. Will you be my friends? I need, you know, and I'm okay doing that today. You know, there was a time that I would not be okay reaching out like that. But, you know, today I know that if I don't reach out for help and I don't tell you I need you, then you don't know. And for me, it's important that people know who I am. You know, there's this one group I'm in. I have more sobriety than anybody there, you know, and I have to be careful because, you know, I don't want to, you know, ruin their energy that they got going on there. And so I just sit and I share my experience when asked, but I try not to you know, get too preachy or anything, because I know I could get that way. But, you know, I just love the fact that I can go anywhere and feel at home and find friends and know that I can find somebody that I can talk to that will understand who I am. And that's incredible. I've been to meetings all over the world. It's an amazing thing. So, of course, I like to complicate my life, and I started dating Kevin about 6 years ago. So now I'm moving back and forth between Colorado and Las Vegas, and I like it. I think it's great, you know. I think I'm going to be like this snowbird, you know, that comes here in the wintertime, and when it starts to get really hot, I'm just going to go back there and do my life. And you know, the good news is that it's okay, you know. I don't have to stress about it. I don't have to think too much about it. I'm just doing what's in front of me. And that's something I could never have done before. Anyways, I don't have much else, but I just do love Alcoholics Anonymous. Keith, thanks so much for asking me to share. And I hope you guys have a great night.